A hidden empire lies buried beneath layers of sandstone and mystery, its secrets caught in the arid winds of the Arabian desert. The Nabataean Empire was once one of the most powerful, enigmatic civilizations, yet today, only traces of its grandeur linger, whispers on the wind, as if the land itself remembers the footsteps of those who once thrived in this harsh world. Petra, their magnificent city carved into red cliffs, still stands, haunted by the echoes of a people who vanished without leaving behind a map of their past. How could an empire so skillfully crafted and astonishingly wealthy leave so little behind? The Nabataeans, unlike other empires, never conquered vast lands with mighty armies or imposed their culture by force. Their strength was subtle, woven through their mastery of trade and their unmatched understanding of the desert's secrets. Their wealth flowed not from conquest but from connection, from the endless caravan trail stretching through the sands, laden with spices, silks, incense, and precious metals. Long before Petra was a stone marvel, the Nabataeans wandered as nomads, moving with the rhythm of the desert, adapting to its harshness, and learning to thrive where others would have perished. Long before they built Petra's towering monuments, the Nabataeans were wanderers, known only as traders and travelers, resilient people accustomed to the brutal heat and unforgiving terrain of the desert. There, in the endless expanse, they learned to read the stars, follow unseen paths, and conserve every drop of water as if it were a treasure. To outsiders, they were ghosts in the sand, people who vanished and reappeared, their paths hidden in secret, their movements swift and silent. But even as nomads, they held dreams of more, dreams that began to crystallize as they uncovered ways to not only survive but to rule in the spaces between powerful empires. In time, they found Petra, a remote location protected by sheer cliffs, hidden in the folds of the mountains. A place unyielding to those who didn't know the desert's language. It was here, nestled in rock and shadow, that the Nabataeans decided to lay down roots, as if the land had finally whispered its approval. Petra became more than just a city, it became a symbol of their knowledge and skill. Carved directly into the mountains, Petra was a wonder, a place that spoke of human strength and ingenuity, of hands chiseling for years until the walls were not only sturdy but stunning, lined with elaborate tombs, temples, and facades that shimmered in the desert light. For centuries, Petra was the pulsing heart of their empire, a haven of life in the middle of vast emptiness. And as the Nabataeans settled, they grew rich beyond imagination, for they held the secrets of trade. From the Arabian Peninsula to the Mediterranean, their routes became arteries connecting the ancient world. Merchants from all corners arrived, bringing goods that the world craved. Frankincense from southern Arabia, myrrh from Yemen, spices from the east, they all moved through the Nabataean routes. While others saw only desert, they saw a network, invisible but powerful, spreading across mountains, through valleys, and over endless sands. Yet, their lives weren't just about wealth. They believed in gods as complex and untamable as the lands they roamed. Chief among them was Dushara, the lord of the mountains, and Alaza, the goddess of might and beauty. To the Nabataeans, these deities were forces entwined with their environment, the spirits of the cliffs and sands themselves. Their gods had no need for palaces, they resided in the very stone of Petra, in the water channels and hidden springs. Carved statues and rock altars paid homage to these deities, silent witnesses to the Nabataeans' devotion. Their genius lay in water, an irony in a desert kingdom, where scarcity ruled. The Nabataeans channeled it with skill that bordered on magic, storing it in hidden cisterns, digging canals that seemed to defy logic, and collecting even the smallest trickle in the rocks. Their engineers had learned the language of the land, and their water system became their lifeline, a secret no enemy could easily take from them. In the driest season, while others withered, Petra bloomed with orchards, gardens, and fountains. Their trading power grew, but their humility remained. To the Nabataeans, riches were not amassed for pride, they were the means to continue, to endure, and to survive. They forged alliances and understood diplomacy, weaving themselves into the politics of greater empires without ever being controlled. Rome's shadow loomed, but they stayed independent, a testament to the respect they commanded. But their success attracted more than just admiration, it drew envy, curiosity, and, in time, a threat from the empire that would swallow much of the ancient world. In the cool shade of Petra's ancient cliffs, where shadows linger and whispers seem to drift through the air, the Nabataeans once worshipped gods whose very presence was etched into the sandstone itself. These gods were not like others in the ancient world, abstract and distant. The Nabataean gods lived among their people, rooted in the rocks, woven into the dust of the desert, and felt in the silence between breaths. Chief among these deities was Dashra, the lord of the mountains, the powerful, unseen god who watched over the Nabataeans from every peak and valley. Dashra was not imagined in human form but as a force, one that couldn't be tamed or fully understood. His presence was marked by simple stones, rough-hewn altars left uncarved, as if no mortal hand could ever shape the image of such a god. In Petra's quiet crevices, these stone altars still sit, testaments to a faith that cherished the earth itself as sacred. Some of these altars are little more than blocks of stone, weathered and ancient, yet when the sun dips low, casting a warm glow over Petra, one can almost feel a pulse from them, a sense that something immense once moved through this space. To the Nabataeans, Dashra was here, his spirit alive in the rock, offering strength and protection to those who honored him. Alongside him was Aluzza, the goddess of beauty, power, and protection. She was the light to Dashra's shadow, a fierce goddess often linked with the moon and the fertility of the land. Aluzza wasn't only a symbol of beauty but a fierce guardian, feared as much as she was loved. To her, the Nabataeans offered their most treasured gifts, for they believed she was the one who brought life to the barren sands and could bless their harvests and families. Statues of her have been found, slender, with striking eyes that seem to gaze across time, their beauty softened but not erased by the sands of centuries. Her altars, too, linger, remnants of devotion left on Petra's ledges, where worshippers may have whispered their hopes and fears. There were other gods as well, each one an extension of the Nabataean understanding of nature's power. The gods did not belong in palaces or human-like temples but in open skies, caves, and mountain shrines. They were raw, untamed forces that could both nurture and destroy, embodying the desert's brutal beauty. These gods did not ask for grand ceremonies, their worship was humble, direct, and deeply personal. Travelers passing through Petra spoke of the Nabataean pantheon with awe, often remarking on how different, how hauntingly connected to the land these gods seemed. Here, in the heart of the Nabataean Empire, the line between human and divine blurred, and the gods felt closer, more real. One story still lingers in the sands, a tale passed down of a shepherd who had lost his way in the high cliffs of Petra as the sun began to set. Just as he feared he would be swallowed by the night, a faint light appeared, a glowing stone high on the ridge. Some say it was Aluzza herself, guiding him back to his flock, her way of showing her protective gaze over her people. To those who heard the tale, it was a reminder of her power and presence, an understanding that even in the darkest places, the goddess's light could find you. Archaeological findings have uncovered small statues, altars, and inscriptions scattered throughout Petra, each a piece of the Nabataean religious life. One striking discovery was a stone stele believed to be dedicated to Dashra, its edges worn smooth by centuries but still bearing faint carvings. Those who unearthed it marveled, sensing the weight of something holy, an artifact that had once held the silent prayers of the people. It was not opulent or adorned with jewels, but the simplicity made it more powerful, a pure connection between people and the god they worshipped. There are traces of rituals, too, glimpses into the sacred acts that once filled Petra's cliffs. Nabataeans would pour offerings of water and incense, letting their sweet fragrance rise like smoke into the desert sky. The scent of frankincense, precious, rare, and beloved by the gods, would fill the night, wafting over the city, mingling with the warm air. Pilgrims would bring gifts to Aluzza, sometimes adorning her shrines with flowers, other times with the fragrant leaves and rare herbs they had gathered on their travels. To honor Dashra, they would gather under the open sky, their offerings humble, simple stones piled on top of each other, or sacred springs marked by small carvings in the rock. The Nabataeans' devotion to their gods was woven into every aspect of their lives. There were no grand walls separating the sacred from the ordinary, no need for grand rituals to summon their gods. Every ledge, every peak, and every shadowed canyon held the presence of the divine. When they prayed, it was not with words alone but with gestures, gifts, and even silence, their faith as sturdy and enduring as the mountains themselves. Scholars believe these gods may have been influenced by neighboring cultures, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Greeks, but in Petra, they took on lives of their own. Dushara, with his strength rooted in stone, and Al-Uzza, her beauty as fierce as the desert itself, became more than borrowed gods. They were Nabataean in every sense. They were not forces to be appeased but companions and guardians, constant and unwavering. Those who visit Petra today might sense, even for a moment, that they are not alone. Standing before the ancient altars, surrounded by cliffs carved with faded faces and ancient symbols, there's a stillness that creeps into the air, an undeniable presence. It's as if the gods of the sandstone cliffs are watching, patient and silent, waiting for someone to remember them, to feel the same reverence their people once felt so many centuries ago. And perhaps, as the last light fades over Petra's walls, those ancient deities are still here, their spirits forever part of the stones that remain. As the first light of dawn touches the cliffs of Petra, the ancient city comes alive with a haunting beauty that feels almost otherworldly. The sandstone walls, tall and towering, reveal their secrets in shades of pink and red, casting shadows that flicker and shift like silent sentinels. There, chiseled from the mountain itself, stand facades that appear timeless, as if they've always been there, as much a part of the rock as the desert wind. This city, a marvel of human achievement, whispers of something beyond, a place where time and mortality collide in the stillness of stone. The Nabataeans carved Petra with purpose, and its architecture is no ordinary feat. Every pillar, every archway, every shrine was placed with reverence. To stand before Petra's greatest monuments, the treasury, the monastery, the royal tombs, is to face a vision, a world built for eternity. The Nabataeans weren't just creating a city, they were crafting a space where the living and the dead could coexist. They envisioned Petra as more than a place for shelter or gathering. It was a sanctuary, a place where life would blend seamlessly into death and beyond. The treasury, Al-Khazna, is the crown jewel of Petra, a structure that rises from the cliffside with breathtaking precision and grace. At first glance, it appears almost too perfect, a building so meticulously cut from the mountain that one wonders if human hands could have truly made it. Its columns and carvings are a testament to the Nabataeans' mastery, but they hold a darker, more mysterious meaning. Some say the urn at the top of the treasury contains a hidden treasure left by a pharaoh, protected by curses, though its real value lies not in gold but in secrets the Nabataeans took to their graves. But the treasury is only the beginning. Petra's architecture unfolds like a tale, with each tomb and structure offering a glimpse into the Nabataean beliefs about life, death, and the mysteries beyond. The tombs carved into the mountainside aren't ordinary graves, they are portals, gateways for the spirits to pass from one world into another. For the Nabataeans, death wasn't an end but a transformation, a shift from flesh to spirit, from light to shadow. The walls of these tombs hold symbols that speak of this transition, depictions of winged figures, celestial bodies, and gods who guided the souls into the afterlife. As you wander deeper into the heart of Petra, the facades begin to change. They grow simpler yet more profound, as if the carvings themselves are holding back their secrets. Some facades are decorated with statues of eagles, creatures believed to carry souls to the heavens. Others bear serpents, symbols of rebirth, spiraling upward as if guiding the spirits toward the skies. Each tomb seems to have its own language, a code written in symbols that we may never fully understand, yet each one speaks of the same belief, that Petra was a city where life met death, where the earth met the divine. In the heart of Petra, one finds the monastery, Al-Dair, a structure even larger than the treasury, imposing and vast. Its purpose remains a mystery. Was it a place of worship, a shrine, or a final resting place for a great Nabataean king? Its sheer size commands reverence, a reminder of the strength and resilience of those who built it. Some believe it was used for religious rituals, a place where priests would gather to honor the gods and perform rites that ensured the safe passage of the dead. The silence around the monastery is almost palpable, as if the spirits of those who once worshipped here still linger, watching over those who visit. To the Nabataeans, Petra was more than a city. It was a bridge between worlds. As they carved into the stone, they carved into the essence of life and death, believing that by building into the earth itself, they would be granted eternity. The Nabataeans left no written explanation of their beliefs, yet their architecture reveals what words cannot. They created Petra as a place that would outlast them, a city that could carry their memories and their souls beyond the end of their days. Some say Petra is a city of the dead, but that is only half of the truth. The Nabataeans saw death not as a final resting but as a continuation, an extension of the life they had lived. Petra, with its tombs and monuments, its silent facades and hidden symbols, stands as a testament to this belief. It is a place that honors both the living and the dead, a city where every carving, every line etched in stone is a reminder that nothing truly dies. The sandstone may weather and fade, but the spirit of Petra, its architecture of eternity, endures, watching over the sands that shift endlessly at its feet. The desert is merciless, its sun unrelenting, the earth cracked and parched. In such a place, water is a treasure beyond gold, yet it hides deep, buried under sands and stone, rarely revealing itself. To most, survival here is a losing battle against thirst and heat. But for the Nabataeans, the desert's whispers held a secret they unlocked and wielded, bending water to their will as if through a pact with nature itself. They became the desert's masters, carving life from the barren ground, creating a place where water flowed against all odds. There, in the dry heart of Petra, where streams seemed like impossible dreams, the Nabataeans built a kingdom, their lifeblood drawn not from conquest but from their mastery over water. The faint trickle of springs, hidden beneath layers of sandstone, became rivers in their hands. They captured rainfall, coaxing it into channels, whispering to it as though it understood, guiding it along paths invisible to others. To those who wandered through Petra's gates, the sight was almost miraculous, green trees blossoming against the red rock, cool pools glistening in the unforgiving sun. It seemed as if the Nabataeans had made a covenant with the land, taming the desert where no one else could. Legends say that their leaders knew the secrets of hidden springs, places where water lay still, hidden far beneath the scorching surface. The Nabataeans became keepers of these sacred spots, protectors of the precious life flowing beneath the sand. There were whispers of rituals, offerings made to the gods in thanks for the water's gift, promises sealed with the stones and the skies. In their hands, water was not merely a resource, it was a spirit, a friend, a lifeline. They treated it with reverence, and in return, it gave them life. Their mastery over water was no simple feat. They carved channels through sheer rock, creating aqueducts that would snake along cliffs, bringing water from distant springs into the heart of Petra. They understood the desert's language, building cisterns and reservoirs that could hold thousands of gallons, enough to sustain life even in the cruelest droughts. Where rain was scarce, they became rainmakers, capturing every drop as it fell, watching over it with the care one might show to a child. Their cisterns were hidden, safe from the eyes of outsiders and invaders, nestled in the rock as if part of the mountain itself. The most remarkable part of their water system was its simplicity, yet it was filled with an ingenuity that modern engineers still struggle to fully grasp. They built small channels that could direct rainwater into cisterns during the brief, precious storms. They crafted sedimentation basins to filter and purify, ensuring that what little water they had remained clean. Even the paths of their streets were tilted just enough to guide the water toward their reservoirs, a silent flow beneath the feet of those who walked Petra's winding roads. To the Nabataeans, water was not just something to use, it was something to protect, a source of reverence and awe. Stories grew around their feet, spreading like the tales of kings and warriors. They spoke of how the Nabataeans could find water where others saw only dust, of their uncanny skill to sense springs that lay far below the earth. Travelers spoke of Petra as a place of miracles, where fountains flowed in the driest months and where pools of water sparkled like sapphires under the desert sun. Even the fiercest of desert winds seemed to respect their presence, whispering secrets only they could hear. Some swore that the Nabataeans had made a pact with the gods of the desert, promising offerings in exchange for water's eternal blessing. And, indeed, there were altars set by springs, places where offerings were made, where small stones and carved icons were placed as tokens of gratitude. The Nabataeans knew that what they held was fragile, that water, like life itself, could slip away if disrespected. The gods they worshipped, Dushra, Aluzza, were guardians as much as givers, their favor tied to how carefully water was used. It was said that when drought came, the people would gather by these sacred spots, their voices raised in prayer, their hands extended over the waters, asking for the gods' kindness, for rain to fall, for springs to flow once more. As Petra grew, the Nabataeans' water system became even more complex. They built hidden reservoirs within the mountains, great stone vessels carved deep into the rock, invisible to invaders, holding water that could sustain them even under siege. These cisterns were shielded by the cliffs, protected from the fierce heat, ensuring that the water within remained cool, safe, and pure. It was as though the rock itself had become a sanctuary, a place where water was guarded, untouched by the sun's cruel gaze. Petra's pools and channels glistened even when the desert lay bone dry. To visitors, the sight was unreal, a vision of paradise in a wasteland. They walked through Petra's gates and saw fountains and shade, the air filled with the scent of greenery, the soft trickle of water a constant melody. And they wondered how such a thing could be. How could an empire have coaxed life out of rock and sand, defying the desert itself? But the Nabataeans knew the truth, that water was not merely a gift to be taken, but a gift to be honored, something sacred woven into their souls and their stones. In the end, the Nabataeans left no grand inscriptions about their achievements, no boastful carvings claiming mastery over the desert. They let the stones and the water speak for themselves. For centuries, Petra's fountains flowed, its trees cast shade over weary travelers, its channels carrying the lifeblood of an empire across miles of unforgiving land. To those who lived there, the presence of water was a quiet promise, a pact between the people and the gods, between the stone and the stream. And even now, when all that remains are the silent ruins, the old channels carved into the rock, one can almost hear it, the soft, eternal murmur of water flowing through the desert, the heartbeat of a city that learned to tame the wild, to make the impossible possible. The sun would barely rise over the desert, yet the Nabataean caravans were already on the move, blending into the sand like whispers lost in the wind. These journeys were no ordinary travels, they were lifelines stretching across continents, paths carved not by tools but by the quiet determination of traders who knew the desert like the beat of their own hearts. They moved through landscapes that would swallow lesser men whole, yet the Nabataeans thrived here, crossing vast plains, weaving between mountain passes, carving a kingdom out of routes invisible to anyone else. By night, the stars guided them, by day, the shifting sands. To see a Nabataean caravan appear from the distant heat mirages was to glimpse a miracle, a phantom out of legend. Their camels carried riches so foreign that they seemed like treasures from other worlds, incense and myrrh with scent so rich they could fill a room with a single spark, silk that felt like water against the skin, spices that lingered like magic on the tongue. From places too distant to imagine, they brought jewels, rare gems, and spices that would change hands from desert towns to distant palaces. They turned these rare, precious things into lifelines, crossing mountains, rivers, and scorching sands until the goods reached their eager destinations. What made their routes even more mysterious was that, unlike the grand roads of empires, the Nabataean trade routes weren't roads at all. They were invisible trails, known only to those trusted with their secrets. No grand marks in the sand gave them away, no signposts pointed the way. Only the Nabataeans knew where to step, when to stop, and where to find hidden oases on these winding paths. Some said their caravan masters had powers beyond ordinary senses, that they could feel the right path under their feet, read the winds as if they were maps. To outsiders, it seemed as though these routes appeared and vanished at will, like the trails were protected by forces unseen. With every journey, these invisible roads grew stronger, stretching from Arabia to the Mediterranean, linking the east to the west. They became arteries of commerce, pulsing with life, feeding the Nabataean Empire with wealth and influence. As word of these exotic goods spread, Petra became more than a city, it became a beacon, a place where east met west, where spices and silks touched hands with the dreams of distant lands. In Petra's markets, the air would fill with the mingling scents of cinnamon, cardamom, and frankincense, creating a perfume as rich as the treasures themselves. To be there, to breathe it in, was to be in a world entirely its own. Their fortune, however, lay not only in goods but in their genius for trade. The Nabataeans understood the value of subtlety and discretion. They guarded their routes and trading practices as though they were the greatest treasures of all. They traveled without fanfare, without leaving signs, passing through villages like ghosts, sharing their secrets with no one. Even those who traded with them might never learn where the goods truly came from or how many days had passed since the caravan set out. To others, it seemed that the Nabataeans had a kind of magic, a way of disappearing into the sands only to reappear with goods worth a king's ransom. Legends grew around their trade routes, stories that added an almost supernatural quality to the Nabataean presence. People whispered that they had guides who were more than human, spirits of the desert that could summon winds to cover tracks, spirits that could hide their caravans from sight. Some swore the Nabataeans could speak with these spirits, ensuring safe passage by honoring the land and leaving no mark on it. And so, with every step, the Nabataean traders carried not just goods but myths, blending reality with mystery until the two were inseparable. Yet it wasn't just about mystery, it was about precision, skill, and unwavering commitment. The Nabataeans knew how to navigate treacherous landscapes, to ration water so that no drop was wasted, to manage their time so perfectly that they arrived exactly when they intended. When storms rose, they moved with the sands rather than fighting against them. When the heat became unbearable, they knew the exact moments to rest. These traders were part of the desert, their survival and success born of a knowledge that transcended maps and measurements. As the Nabataean Empire grew, its lifeblood, its trade routes, grew with it. Spices flowed from India and silk from China, moving westward across deserts and seas, passing from the hands of one Nabataean trader to another, across distances so great they seemed to defy belief. Incense, myrrh, frankincense, all became part of the empire's heartbeat, sought after by everyone from Roman emperors to Egyptian pharaohs. Wealth poured into Petra, and with it, the city blossomed into a wonder of stone and spirit, a metropolis fueled by the whispers of silk and spice. In Petra's markets, traders and merchants would gather, each bringing tales of distant lands, stories told in fragments, passed down from traveler to traveler, from caravan master to merchant. They would sit under the open sky, surrounded by the rarest goods, sharing meals spiced with the very flavors they sold, speaking of lands across the ocean, mountains covered in snow, and seas as wide as the desert itself. These moments, these exchanges, turned Petra into a tapestry of the world itself, a place where no single culture dominated, where each piece of silk and every pinch of spice carried stories from the ends of the earth. To the Nabataeans, wealth was a tool, a means of survival, a power that allowed them to thrive where others faltered. The riches they amassed allowed them to protect their lands, to build Petra into a fortress of trade, and to live lives filled with beauty, art, and wisdom. Their empire was more than walls and weapons, it was woven from trust, knowledge, and secrets. They didn't need armies to defend their territory, their true strength lay in the mystery they held, the secrets of the desert that only they understood. Over time, even as other empires rose and fell, the Nabataean trade networks endured. The world changed, but the flow of goods continued, an invisible thread weaving through kingdoms and connecting continents. These routes left no physical trace on the land, no monuments to mark their passing, yet their presence lingered, like a heartbeat beneath the sands. And with every caravan that traveled these paths, the Nabataean legacy grew, not in size but in spirit, a testament to a people who understood the desert's language and turned it into wealth beyond measure. To this day, the memory of the Nabataeans lives on in the scent of spices, the rustle of silk, and the stories of a people who thrived in one of the harshest places on earth, leaving behind not a footprint but a legend. Their roads remain hidden, their trade routes invisible, yet the impact of their empire remains etched into the history of the ancient world. As dawn broke over Petra, shadows stretched long across the sandstone cliffs, and the quiet hum of morning came alive with voices, footsteps, and the ringing of hammers against rock. This was a city not just built on stone but on the dreams and faith of a people who turned the desert into an oasis of life and spirit. To live as a Nabataean was to be part of a world where merchants were as revered as kings, and where the unseen hand of mysticism guided not only temples but also trade, homes, and families. Society was as finely crafted as their grand facades, each role carved and honored, from the merchant to the mystic, from artisans to priests. Merchants held a special place, regarded as architects of Petra's prosperity, moving between caravans and marketplaces with the practiced ease of those who hold an empire in their hands. They brought treasures from far-off lands, negotiating deals that shaped the city's fortunes. These were not just tradesmen but master storytellers, their negotiations a dance of words and values. They carried in their memories the knowledge of distant empires, the sense of spices, and the stories of far-flung seas and mountains. Through their work, Petra thrived, shimmering with the prosperity that spread far beyond its borders. In the heart of the city, artisans honed their craft, each creation a mark of devotion, each detail a message to the gods or an expression of the life they loved. These artisans carved stories into the walls, sculpting figures and symbols into the stone that seemed to breathe under their hands. Every doorway, every arch, every column held a piece of their souls, a reflection of a people who believed their creations should outlast them. They gave form to the Nabataean identity, binding their culture into walls that still stand as a testament to their mastery. To touch the cool, carved sandstone of Petra's facades was to feel the heartbeat of every artisan who had once poured life into its forms. Among them, women held roles that often surprised outsiders. Their presence was woven into the fabric of Nabataean society in ways rare for the ancient world. Women were believed to hold authority in places where others only saw silence. They moved through Petra with a freedom that spoke of respect, intelligence, and power. Some records suggest that they were merchants, priests, and healers, keeping the balance in their families and communities. Tales are told of a wise Nabataean woman who once negotiated with caravan traders from across the sea, securing the finest silks and spices for Petra, her words as sharp as any blade, her voice carrying an influence that stretched beyond borders. Legends tell of priestesses who stood before altars, their voices rising in prayer, their hands lifted to the gods, seeking blessings for their people. Some say these priestesses could speak to spirits, receiving guidance from the gods themselves. Al-Uzza, the goddess of power and protection, was revered deeply, and her priestesses were believed to walk between worlds, protectors not just of Petra but of every life that depended on its strength. People would gather around them, placing offerings, lighting small lamps, praying that the blessings bestowed on the priestesses would extend to them, guarding their homes and families. The priests, too, were keepers of Petra's spirit. Their rituals connected the people to the divine, serving as a bridge between the living world and the gods watching from the heavens. They guarded the altars, where incense wafted through the air, the fragrant smoke blending with the whispers of prayer. The priests knew every ritual, every offering, every story that tied them to the unseen forces surrounding Petra. And when the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting Petra in a glow of twilight, these priests would lead processions by torchlight, their chants filling the air, a reverence that stilled even the restless desert winds. Yet it wasn't only the wealthy merchants or the revered priests who shaped Nabataean society. Laborers, craftspeople, and builders also carried a unique honor. These were the hands that raised Petra's towering facades, that carved tombs into the cliffs, creating a city unlike any other. Their work was as respected as it was physical, every cut, every stone, was a part of Petra's soul. Even as sweat and dust clung to them, their toil was a sacred duty, their hands crafting the city as if sculpting it directly from the heart of the mountain. People spoke of them with pride, for their labor was not merely work, it was the creation of eternity. There were also tales of healers, men and women who could read the earth's secrets, who knew which herbs could heal and which could harm. These healers would grind roots into powders, mix leaves into salves, using knowledge passed down through generations. They were the ones people turned to in times of sickness or injury, trusted to bring health back to the community. Stories spread of certain healers who could speak to the earth, who claimed that the very rocks of Petra held answers, that by touching the sandstone, they could feel life's pulse. All of Nabataean society held a mystical thread, a belief in things unseen, in stories that could not always be proved but were felt deeply. Every role carried its own mythology, a shared understanding that they were not just people of stone and trade, but people who existed in a world where the divine was close, where gods listened, where the unseen touched every part of their lives. Even the simplest acts were done with a reverence, a belief that what they built and made was an offering to something larger than themselves. Perhaps this is why Petra still feels alive, even now, standing quietly against the desert. Every rock seems to echo the lives of those who once walked its paths, each shadow a memory of the merchants, mystics, and makers who gave their spirits to the city. And as the sun casts its last light on Petra, you can almost hear their voices, the traders bargaining, the priests chanting, the artisans singing to their craft, the women's laughter, the murmured stories of healers. All these voices woven into Petra's walls, as timeless as the desert wind. As the sun lowered over Petra, casting its final red glow on the sandstone cliffs, a chill settled in the air, a quiet premonition, like the breath before a storm. Word had come from the west, tales of a force unlike any other, vast and insatiable, Rome. To the Nabataeans, these stories felt like echoes from another world, distant and almost mythic. Yet, as Rome's reach extended further, Petra could no longer afford to look away. The Romans had seen Petra's riches, heard tales of its trade routes, its wealth flowing like veins of gold beneath the desert. And just as Petra had thrived through its alliances and guarded secrets, Rome, too, understood the value of control. The desert winds carried whispers of negotiations and threats, messengers from Rome with their polished armor glinting under the sun, bringing promises of peace with hands ready to conquer. Rome respected strength, and in the Nabataeans, they saw both a potential ally and an adversary. At first, the Nabataeans sought peace, extending cautious alliances. Their wise rulers knew the cost of open war with an empire that swept across continents with unmatched discipline and military force. They weighed each decision, understanding that one misstep could cost them the legacy of Petra itself. They sent emissaries, each word chosen like a stone in the walls of their city, each promise crafted with care. The Nabataeans, so skilled in the art of trade and diplomacy, managed for a time to walk this narrow path. There were brief moments of alliance, tense meetings in desert outposts where Roman generals and Nabataean leaders spoke of friendship while their armies waited just beyond sight, as if the wrong word might ignite an unquenchable fire. But Rome's ambitions were endless. To Rome, alliance was not a bond, it was a step toward ownership. For every year Petra remained independent, it was a reminder that there were forces Rome had not yet subdued. The sands began to shift, and with them, trust eroded. Stories spread of Roman spies moving through Nabataean lands, and with them came an air of unease. The Nabataeans were aware that these friends had sharp eyes and sharp minds, calculating each moment for weakness. It was as if Rome was watching, waiting for Petra to stumble. Tensions rose when Roman soldiers began appearing along the trade routes, their presence a warning. Once, a Nabataean caravan, carrying precious silks and spices, encountered a Roman patrol that seized its goods without reason, declaring that Rome had a right to them. The Nabataeans were furious. To them, these caravans were lifelines, sacred as blood. The Romans had not just taken goods, they had struck at the heart of Nabataean pride. Legends tell of a Nabataean leader who rode out to meet a Roman general in the middle of the desert under a blazing sky. There, they exchanged fierce words, each refusing to bow. The Roman made it clear that Rome's patience was wearing thin, that Petra would do well to remember the fate of those who defied them. But the Nabataean ruler, his eyes hardened by the desert sun, responded with a promise of his own, that Petra would not be won by threats, that they were not a people to yield easily. Despite the clashes, the Nabataeans held fast, choosing their battles with precision. When skirmishes broke out along the borders, they fought with the resilience of a people who knew the desert better than any outsider. Roman soldiers, unaccustomed to the harsh sands, found themselves outmaneuvered by Nabataean warriors who seemed to vanish and reappear like ghosts among the cliffs. The Nabataeans didn't rely on brute force, they used the land itself, turning its vast emptiness into an ally. In the dead of night, when the desert was silent, they moved like shadows, striking where the Romans least expected. Even Rome, with all its might, struggled to tame a people so deeply intertwined with the desert itself. But Rome's persistence was relentless. They returned again and again, wearing down the Nabataean defenses, pressuring Petra from all sides. Petra's leaders faced impossible decisions, each choice weighed with the survival of their people. How long could they resist an empire that stretched from the deserts of Africa to the shores of Britain? How long before the strength of their allies faltered, before their own defenses wore thin? The Nabataeans were a people of strength, of pride, but Rome was a beast that never tired, a force that neither night nor desert could turn away. And then, there were the betrayals. Some among the Nabataeans, seeing the futility of endless resistance, began to murmur of yielding, of striking deals to save what they could. They whispered in secret, speaking of wealth, of promises of Roman favor, perhaps even power under Roman rule. These betrayals cut deeper than any sword, dividing Petra's people, pitting brother against brother, friend against friend. To see their own begin to sway under Roman promises felt like a slow poison, as if the very spirit of Petra were being eroded from within. As the years went on, Rome's pressure only increased, and the Nabataeans, once so powerful, began to feel the weight of this endless struggle. Rome's army approached like a shadow over the city, and Petra, once a thriving hub of trade and culture, now stood vulnerable. The walls of stone, the cliffs that had been their sanctuary, seemed to hold a heavy silence, as if waiting. Petra had stood through time and trial, but now, its fate hung by a thread. When the Romans finally entered Petra, the city did not fall in a roar of battle but in a somber silence. It was said that as the Roman soldiers walked through the city, they marveled at its beauty, its splendor, but to the Nabataeans, this was a hollow victory. Their empire, once fiercely independent, had been woven into Rome's endless conquest. Yet, in the hearts of the Nabataeans who remained, a fire smoldered. Though they now bore the mark of Rome, their spirit was not entirely subdued. They had lost the land, but they had not lost their pride, their memory, nor the stories of a time when they stood unbroken. Petra's walls, their faces carved with the legacy of their people, continued to stand, a silent testament to the Nabataean will, to their endurance, and to a legacy that Rome could not conquer. In the heart of Petra, when dusk cloaks the rose-colored stones, a silence lingers, a silence that seems almost alive, as if the city holds secrets no one can understand. Scattered across the ruins, on walls and pillars worn by time and sand, are faint carvings in a script both familiar and foreign. Nabataean Aramaic, an ancient script, captures echoes of voices lost long ago, the whispers of a people whose words once breathed through this silent, still city. Yet, like a language caught between worlds, the symbols hide as much as they reveal, holding their meaning close, like a final guard over a culture that would not surrender everything to time. Among the carvings are single words, fragments of sentences that break off before they can be fully understood. Historians lean close to the stone, fingertips grazing the etched symbols as if by touch alone they might feel the pulse of the past. These aren't simply letters, each stroke and line feels deliberate, as if charged with an emotion that cannot be seen but only sensed. These are stories written in a code that has survived generations, tales of triumphs and tragedies that the Nabataeans were determined to preserve, even as the years threatened to erase them. They say some of these inscriptions were more than messages, they were prayers, spells, secrets passed only between the chosen. Myths have grown around certain scripts, tales of messages left by ancient Nabataean mystics who had glimpsed truths too powerful to speak aloud. They carved their wisdom into Petra's cliffs, thinking that if they bound their knowledge to the stone, it would remain safe, protected from invaders, and eternal, like Petra itself. There are stories of lost books, teachings that once held Nabataean wisdom, rituals, and knowledge of the world and stars. Some say these books contained instructions on how to read the land, how to predict the rains, how to interpret the signs from the gods. But when the Romans arrived, when the winds of time swept through Petra, these books vanished. People whispered of scrolls hidden in secret chambers, sealed in tombs, or buried in the sands, awaiting those who could truly understand them. Others believed the texts were destroyed purposefully, hidden forever to prevent foreign eyes from reading Nabataean secrets. In certain ruins, inscriptions were found in places no ordinary person would think to look. These messages seemed hidden, etched into the backs of stones, the crevices of walls, as if they were meant for no mortal eyes. Words were buried so deeply that even sunlight could scarcely touch them. Some were messages of devotion to Dushara, the god of the Nabataeans, their protector in life and death. Others were fragments of tales, legends about ancient kings and queens, their victories and losses, all carved as a testament to the lives they led. Even the script itself, Nabataean Aramaic, seems like it was built to hide mysteries. It appears simple but shifts subtly, as if evolving with each generation. Some symbols twist and loop unexpectedly, as if only those who truly know the language could understand. Scholars have spent lifetimes trying to unlock each nuance, to grasp the full weight of every line. Yet even as they translate, there is something elusive, as though the script dances just out of reach, keeping its heart hidden from those who have not lived in its world. On certain walls, they've found carvings that seem like codes, patterns that almost look like ordinary phrases but hold something more, something beyond a literal reading. Some have theorized these are messages from Nabataean priests, ways of speaking to each other across time and space, knowing that only those who truly understood their world would be able to read between the lines. There are symbols that seem to repeat, signs that hint at themes of life, death, and what lies beyond. For the Nabataeans, these were not just carvings. These were pieces of their souls, woven into words that would endure long after their voices had faded. Imagine standing there, in the darkened chamber of an ancient temple, tracing the faint outline of an inscription so old that your touch feels like it might crumble the stone. You follow the lines, feeling a strange sense of kinship, like you're brushing against a mind from thousands of years ago, a hand that carved these very shapes. Perhaps this is why the Nabataeans chose stone, so that their language could survive in ways that skin and blood could not, enduring through the very bones of Petra. There is a legend of a Nabataean scribe, a young woman said to have carved messages for her people on the eve of their greatest battle. Her words were not for warriors, but for the generations to come. She knew her people would be scattered, their language at risk of being forgotten, and so she carved stories of their lives, their gods, their dreams, into hidden corners of Petra, hoping that one day, someone would understand them. She worked through the night, her chisel gliding over the stone, her words a final defiance against time. These inscriptions hold the weight of a culture that was both fiercely proud and deeply mystical. And even as scholars work to decipher the remnants, there is a part of the Nabataean language that remains stubbornly silent, as if refusing to give up its last secrets. Some believe that certain inscriptions contain messages not meant for us but for the gods alone, a dialogue between the human and divine. To read them might be to intrude on something sacred, a conversation that transcends human understanding, meant only for those who knew the gods of the Nabataeans and walked in Petra's ancient light. And so, as the light fades and shadows cover the stones, the language of the Nabataeans remains like a whisper that never quite fades. Beneath the fierce desert sun, where most life withers under the weight of heat and dry winds, the Nabataeans knew of secrets thriving within the harsh land. To them, the desert wasn't a barren place, it was alive, full of remedies, potions, and elixirs that had been passed down in whispers, from one generation of healers to the next. In the hands of Nabataean healers, common desert plants became lifelines, sources of cures that could soothe pain, mend wounds, and perhaps, if the stories are to be believed, protect against forces unseen. They spoke of a healer, an elderly woman, whose wisdom was known across the lands. People traveled from far and wide, carrying with them ailments and pains, hoping she would grant them relief. Her knowledge wasn't written in scrolls or tablets, it was etched in the patterns of her hands, the way her fingers moved over the herbs, and in the whispered prayers that accompanied her treatments. Some say that in her presence, they felt a warmth as if a protective veil had descended over them, something beyond her herbs and roots, a spirit, a blessing that ran deeper than medicine itself. The Nabataeans had access to an astonishing array of remedies, hidden in plain sight within the hardy plants that grew between rocks and in patches of earth. The resin of the frankincense tree, harvested with care, could be transformed into oils that soothed aching joints, relieved fever, and seemed to possess a calming power that went beyond the physical. In the evenings, after the fires burned low, stories drifted about the strange effects of these oils, that they could lift a spirit out of darkness, protect a person from curses, even bring dreams filled with messages from beyond. There were plants known only to the Nabataeans, herbs with properties that outsiders could scarcely believe. The leaves of certain desert shrubs were mixed into teas that could still the throbbing pain of a wound or quiet the restless mind of a person troubled by nightmares. They believed that these plants held a kind of spirit, a connection to the earth itself, and treating a wound was not just a physical act, it was spiritual. To heal the body was to recognize the soul, to restore a balance that illness had disturbed. And the water, the rare, sacred springs scattered throughout Nabataean lands, were the source of legends. Some said that Dashera, the guardian god of Petra, blessed these waters himself, infusing them with a power beyond understanding. Pilgrims came, not only for the water's cooling touch on their skin but for its rumored ability to heal even the gravest wounds. People would dip their hands, feeling the coolness slide over their skin, and say they could feel their worries slip away, as if the water itself drank their pain, leaving only calm and clarity behind. One such spring, hidden deep within a canyon, was known as the Spirit's Touch. Those who bathed in its waters said they left feeling lighter, as if an unseen weight had lifted from their hearts. It was said that the spirits of ancient healers lingered around this spring, blessing those who entered with renewed vitality. To touch its waters was to feel the presence of generations of healers who had drawn from it, gathering strength and wisdom, before passing on. In the Nabataean market stalls, dried roots, pungent leaves, and small vials filled with thick, dark liquid were as valuable as jewels. Healers would hold them up to the light, inspecting them closely, muttering blessings before exchanging them. Children would watch, eyes wide, as healers turned their attention to these strange items, grinding the leaves and mixing powders with an attention that spoke of reverence, as if they weren't preparing mere medicine, but a gift from the earth itself. Some families held on to their healing secrets fiercely, teaching only their children and only when the time was right, for each herb had its own spirit, and it was not to be disrespected or taken lightly. At night, around the fire, tales circulated of the most mysterious of Nabataean healers, those who were said to possess more than skill with herbs. People claimed they had powers of foresight, an ability to sense illness before it showed its signs, or to understand the heart's troubles hidden behind a simple cough. One healer, known as the Herald of Shadows, was said to enter a trance, using her visions to locate rare plants that grew only in specific seasons, in hidden places. She claimed that the plants spoke to her, showing her how they could be used, which roots to avoid, which flowers could mend broken bones, which leaves would cure fevers. This depth of knowledge created an almost mythic reverence for Nabataean medicine among those who experienced it. It wasn't simply a science, it was a blending of spirit and earth, of human and divine. Some said the Nabataean healers could channel the gods themselves, calling upon Alaza or Dashera to bless their efforts, infusing their potions with a power that was as close to magic as anything in the mortal world. They never took credit alone for their abilities, each cure, each potion was a gift of the gods, they said, a reminder of a power greater than any one healer. In one corner of Petra, a small shrine was built in honor of these healers and their gifts. It was simple, just a stone carved with an inscription praising those who worked in service to life and spirit. Offerings were left there, bundles of desert sage, tiny vials of oil, fragments of dried herbs, as symbols of gratitude. And it's said that on quiet nights, if you listen closely, you can still hear the murmured blessings, the soft voices of healers, echoing over the sands, offering their protection to those who seek it. The air was thick with the weight of centuries as pilgrims made their way through the winding paths of Petra, their footsteps soft against the stone as they approached the towering cliffs that loomed above them. To them, Petra was not merely a city, it was a sacred place, a doorway between the mortal and divine. The mountains themselves seemed to hum with a secret energy, and the stone facades carved into the cliffs held whispers of ancient prayers, forgotten rites, and stories that only the earth itself knew. For the Nabataeans, the land was alive, sacred, a reflection of the cosmos itself. The temples, the tombs, and even the intricate carvings etched into the stone told a story of divine alignment, of places and structures built not by mere hands but by the will of the gods themselves. What had once been a place of trade had become a place of pilgrimage, a site where the very earth and sky were believed to meet. The Nabataeans understood that the world around them was not random but sacred. They didn't just build cities, they shaped landscapes to reflect the divine order, aligning their temples, tombs, and even their homes with celestial bodies. The very geography of Petra was designed as a map of the heavens, and it was said that anyone who could understand its layout would also understand the divine plan. From the grand temple of Dushra, where the king would stand to receive the blessings of the gods, to the small, hidden shrines tucked away in forgotten corners of the city, each stone was placed with intention. The Nabataeans believed the flow of the land and the positioning of the stars were intimately connected. Temples faced certain directions, doors aligned with certain constellations, and at the right moments of the year, the sun would pour through narrow gaps in the cliffs, illuminating sacred statues or inscriptions, creating a connection between the heavens and the earth. It was as if the Nabataeans had unlocked the code of the universe itself, carving their wisdom into the land in a way that no outsider could truly understand. It is said that only the truly devout could feel the pull of Petra's sacred energy. The closer they came to the heart of the city, the more they felt it, a deep, vibrating hum that resonated through the stone beneath their feet. And it wasn't just Petra, other Nabataean sites scattered across the desert landscape also held this same power. There was the remote Almajar, where a great temple sat atop a hill, and the even more mysterious site at Jabal Haran, a place long believed to be the final resting place of Aaron, the brother of Moses, now known as a sacred site for pilgrims. These places were more than structures, they were an embodiment of Nabataean spirituality, a cosmic alignment of nature, earth, and the divine. And yet, what remains of their sacred geography is shrouded in mystery. Some say there are hidden routes carved into the earth, secret chambers that hold knowledge long lost. According to legend, these paths were known only to a select few, passed down through generations of high priests and priestesses, their locations marked not on maps but in the hearts of those chosen to protect them. To find these hidden routes was to walk on the path of the gods, to enter a world where the divine and earthly realms blurred together. For those who discovered the ancient ways, it was said that the landscape itself would reveal new truths, whispering the secrets of the Nabataeans in ways the rest of the world would never hear. Some of these myths told of hidden chambers deep within Petra, chambers that could only be accessed through secret doors, camouflaged by the very rock that surrounded them. Inside, sacred objects, scrolls, and artifacts of great power were said to be hidden, sealed away by a divine will, waiting for the worthy to find them. The stories told of those who had tried to uncover these places, adventurers, explorers, and even kings, only to be thwarted, the chambers forever locked in place by the forces that controlled them. It was as if Petra itself, the great city carved from stone, was alive, guarding its secrets with an ancient and unyielding will. In the evenings, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky above Petra would come alive with the glow of stars, and the temples seemed to glow in response, as if they were reacting to the cosmos itself. The Nabataeans believed this was no coincidence, the temples were built with the stars in mind. The very stones they used had been chosen to reflect the energy of the heavens, and when the night sky lit up, it was as though the gods were watching over their sacred city, blessing those below with their presence. But even beyond the beauty and the mythology, there was something haunting about the way the Nabataeans viewed their sacred geography. To them, the land wasn't just a place to live, it was a map of their spiritual journey, a guide to understanding their connection with the gods. Every stone was placed with intention, every corner of the land was part of a divine plan. And as their empire began to crumble, with the arrival of foreign powers like Rome, the sacred geography of Petra seemed to begin to fade, too, as if the land itself had begun to mourn the loss of its people. The ruins, the temples, the sacred sites, they all stand as silent witnesses now. But the myths remain, wrapped in the silence of the desert. They speak of the hidden routes, the secret chambers, and the land that was once a living map of the divine. The pilgrims who walk through Petra today cannot help but feel the weight of history pressing against them, as if the city still holds something beyond its walls, beyond the carvings and inscriptions, something that has been lost to time but not to memory. And in the quiet of the night, as the wind sweeps through the narrow canyons, one can almost hear the echoes of the past, the soft whispers of the Nabataeans, still speaking, still waiting, for someone to understand the sacred geography they left behind. The walls of Petra were not just carved stone, they were a canvas, alive with meaning, each line, curve, and figure telling a story of a people deeply connected to the world around them, the heavens above them, and the gods who guided their lives. As the sun touched the horizon, the light revealed intricate carvings of creatures, gods, and symbols, each one holding a story that had lived for centuries in the shadows. The artistry of the Nabataeans was not just a reflection of their skill, it was a language, a sacred code meant to convey deeper truths. In every sculpture, in every piece of pottery, there were symbols that whispered of gods and mythologies, of journeys and triumphs, of a connection to forces far greater than mere mortals could comprehend. The smooth contours of the stone busts, the delicate lines on clay vessels, the bold designs etched into the facades of tombs, each was more than art. It was a manifestation of the Nabataeans' beliefs, their dreams, and their fears, etched permanently into the fabric of their civilization. The faces of their gods stood watch over the land, immortalized in stone, their eyes eternally gazing over the people they protected. Among these figures, the most recognizable were Dushra and Aluzza, but their forms were far from ordinary. Dushra, with his strong and regal features, was the embodiment of power, his presence standing as a protector over the Nabataean people. His image appeared frequently in the form of statues, sometimes riding a horse, sometimes standing tall with his hands outstretched as if blessing the land itself. Yet, the details in his depiction were not only his strength, they were the echoes of other cultures, shadows of Egyptian gods, with their regal postures and serene expressions, or the mighty Mesopotamian deities, whose presence filled the temples with an air of the divine. The Nabataeans did not create gods from scratch, they borrowed, they blended, they made connections, forging their own unique identities from the ancient powers that shaped the world. The iconography of their gods reflected this cultural melting pot, merging styles and symbols from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Arabian Peninsula. Aluzza, for example, often appeared in the form of a stone bust with intricate patterns that had roots in both Semitic and Egyptian art. Her image, though primarily female, was bold, her eyes piercing as though holding knowledge that transcended time and space. The symbolism in her face and form was unmistakable, a reminder of the goddess's power and her dominion over love, fertility, and war. She was a protector, a mother, and a warrior all wrapped into one, her spirit represented through powerful imagery that transcended boundaries, tying the Nabataeans to the wider world around them. Her connection to Venus, the Roman goddess of love, was also hinted in these motifs, as the Nabataeans walked the delicate line between embracing their own identity and acknowledging the vast empire that sought to control them. The artistry wasn't confined to gods alone. The landscapes of the desert itself were painted in bold strokes across the pottery and sculptures that the Nabataeans created. Pottery, often simple but elegant, bore motifs of plants, animals, and celestial symbols, echoing the Nabataeans' connection to the harsh yet beautiful land they inhabited. Stylized camels, the lifeblood of their trade routes, appeared frequently, along with palm trees, the only respite the desert could offer. These images were more than decorative, they spoke of survival, of thriving where others might wither. The Nabataeans didn't just survive in the desert, they made the desert their home, shaping the land to their will, leaving behind not only magnificent structures but an enduring legacy of art that would speak to those who came after them. The presence of animals was a common motif, too, in the iconography of the Nabataeans. In the detailed carvings of camels and horses, one could see the deep reverence the Nabataeans had for these creatures, who were so integral to their trade and daily life. Yet, these creatures were never depicted simply as beasts of burden, they were often shown in powerful poses, symbolizing endurance and strength, and they served as reminders of the dangerous journeys the Nabataean merchants took to trade their goods across the vast deserts. These animals, too, became symbols of the empire's reach, their journey echoing the paths of the traders who brought luxury goods, spices, and treasures from faraway lands. Then there were the abstract symbols, mysterious and cryptic in their meaning. The spirals, geometric patterns, and repeated motifs woven throughout Nabataean art were believed to have a deeper significance, perhaps tied to the cyclical nature of life, the movement of stars, or the flow of water. The spiral, in particular, was a recurring symbol, suggesting the infinite and the eternal, a visual echo of the Nabataean understanding of the world and the gods. It was said that certain motifs, like the spiral, were meant to represent the journey of the soul, spiraling upward toward enlightenment, or the flow of time, endlessly turning in its cycles. Perhaps the most mystical of all the Nabataean artistic expressions were the carved inscriptions, scattered throughout Petra and its surroundings, which seemed to hold even more meaning than the visible art. These inscriptions, often written in Nabataean Aramaic, were not only records of trade or royal decrees, they were the messages of the gods themselves, whispers of ancient wisdom etched into the stone. Some scholars believe these inscriptions held the key to understanding Nabataean rituals, while others speculate they were part of an esoteric system of knowledge, kept hidden from all but the initiated. Whatever their purpose, they were more than just words, they were magic, an attempt to bridge the gap between the mortal and divine, a plea for favor or a testament to a great victory. The mythology woven into these artistic forms was not always easy to grasp. Some stories were clear, like the tale of Dushra's victory over an enemy king, but others remained in the realm of the mysterious. The figures and symbols told stories of journeys taken, of battles won and lost, of divine intervention and human struggle. The art was both a personal reflection of the Nabataean people's connection to their gods and a collective memory of their empire's glory, trials, and triumphs. It was a constant reminder that the Nabataeans did not just live, they lived in constant communion with the divine, shaping their world through art, symbols, and stories that would survive long after they were gone. As the night falls over Petra and the stars above begin to twinkle, the silhouettes of these carvings seem to come alive once more, their stories whispering through the ancient stone. The Nabataeans left behind more than buildings and trade routes, they left behind a world of symbols, a language that still speaks to us across the millennia. Each image, each figure, each stroke of the chisel was not just art. It was a message. A legacy. A plea for immortality. And as we stand in the shadow of their creations, we are reminded of the timeless power of art, of stories, and of the people who lived, loved, and dreamed within the walls of Petra. The wind swept through the empty streets of Petra, stirring the dust and sand, brushing against the towering, silent facades of the once majestic tombs. The gods that had watched over the Nabataeans for centuries, Dushra, Aluzza, and their pantheon of deities, had fallen silent. The air felt different now, as if the weight of the gods had shifted, their presence no longer as palpable as it had been in times past. The world of the Nabataeans was changing, their beliefs folding into something new. It was not just the landscape that was altering but the very heart of their civilization. The gods had always been there, guiding the people through the harsh desert, offering protection, fertility, and strength. But whispers of a new power had begun to circulate. The first signs were subtle, perhaps a new god being worshipped quietly in private temples or stories carried on the wind from distant lands. The old ways, once so firmly rooted in every stone of Petra, seemed to lose their grip. The Nabataeans, like so many others, were beginning to hear the call of something different, something that would shake the foundations of their world. The gods of their ancestors were not fading from memory, they were being replaced. Christianity had already begun its quiet rise, slipping between the cracks of the Roman Empire, spreading like a seed planted in the windswept desert. Its promise of eternal life, of salvation through a single God, spoke to many hearts. The stories of Christ, the miracles, the resurrection, echoed through the trading cities, carried by merchants and travelers who spoke of a man who had changed the course of history. The Nabataeans were no strangers to foreign beliefs, they had lived their lives alongside different cultures, influenced by the mighty empires that surrounded them. But the call of Christianity was different. It spoke to the spirit in a way that no other religion had. The gods of Petra, those powerful figures of stone and clay, suddenly seemed distant, as if their ancient voices could no longer reach the hearts of the people. The shift was gradual, at first a whisper among the elite, then spreading like wildfire through the common folk. Temples to the old gods began to empty, and once sacred spaces started to feel hollow. As the influence of Christianity spread, the Nabataean pantheon of gods began to fade from view, their temples becoming abandoned ruins, overtaken by the new faith. In the distance, the sound of Christian prayers began to replace the chants once offered to Dashera and Al-Azza. The holy sites where pilgrims had once come to offer sacrifices now stood silent, their sacred stones wearing down under the weight of history. But it wasn't just Christianity that began to reshape the Nabataean soul, it was Islam, too. By the time Islam swept across the desert, bringing with it its vision of a single, all-powerful God, the people of Petra had already begun to turn away from their old beliefs. The desert, once filled with the whispers of the ancient gods, was now a place where new truths were being forged. The arrival of Islam brought with it a sense of finality. The polytheistic world that the Nabataeans had known for centuries seemed to be washed away in the tides of time, replaced by the unifying power of a single, all-encompassing God. The winds that once carried the names of many gods now whispered a single name, Allah. The once vibrant temples to multiple deities were now abandoned, their faces worn down by time, their secrets buried under layers of sand. As the new faiths took root, the old gods were not simply forgotten, they became the stuff of legend. Stories of the end of the gods began to emerge, filled with omens and signs that the once sacred land of Petra had been abandoned by the divine. The cracks in the stone facades were seen as a symbol of divine displeasure, a warning that the gods were no longer watching over the land. The sun, once a symbol of the eternal presence of Dashera, was now seen as a fleeting moment, passing across the sky and leaving no trace of the ancient power it once represented. The people began to speak of the gods as if they were merely characters in stories, no longer holding the same weight in the hearts of the Nabataeans. The idea of multiple gods, once so integral to their identity, seemed an antiquated relic of a time long past. The decline of the Nabataean pantheon was not just a religious shift, it was the end of an era. The very soul of Petra, the heart of the Nabataean world, seemed to be in mourning. As the gods faded, so too did the greatness of the empire. The trade routes that had once brought wealth and influence to the Nabataeans began to wither. The magnificent city of Petra, once a bustling center of commerce and culture, grew quieter with each passing year. The glory days of the Nabataeans, marked by their skillful navigation of the desert and their devotion to their gods, seemed to slip into the past, overshadowed by the rise of foreign empires and new religious movements. Myths spread like wildfire, telling of the fall of Petra not as a conquest by enemy armies, but as a result of the gods' abandonment. It was said that the gods had turned away from the people when they turned to foreign faiths, that their silence was a punishment for forsaking the old ways. Some spoke of omens, strange occurrences, like unnatural storms or eerie lights in the desert sky, that were seen as signs of the gods' displeasure. The shift from polytheism to monotheism was not just a religious change, it was seen as the beginning of the end, the final chapter in the story of the Nabataeans' greatness. In the midst of this shift, the people of Petra found themselves caught between two worlds. On one side, the old gods of the desert, once so vivid and real, seemed to fade into the distance. On the other, the new gods promised a different kind of salvation, but one that felt foreign and distant. The old ways, the rituals that had defined their lives for centuries, were now part of history. The legends of Dushra and Al-Uzza, gods of fertility, power, and protection, seemed more like distant memories than living forces. And yet, their influence lingered, not in the temples or statues, but in the hearts of those who remembered what had once been. The rise of Christianity and Islam did not erase the past, but it marked a turning point for the Nabataeans, one that left them standing at the crossroads of history. The old gods, with their rituals and divine presence, gave way to the promise of salvation in a new form. The gods of Petra had not simply disappeared, they had been eclipsed, their stories relegated to myth, their once sacred places now silent witnesses to a world that had moved on. The desert, once filled with their power, had grown quiet. One day, Petra, the once thriving jewel of the desert, seemed to just vanish. The streets that had echoed with the bustle of merchants, the calls of traders, and the murmur of prayers to forgotten gods fell silent. The grandeur of the city, carved into the rose-red cliffs, stood still, as if waiting for something that never came. The people, where did they go? The empire that had stretched its fingers far into the desert and beyond, was no longer. It was as if the Nabataeans had simply melted into the desert winds, leaving behind only the fading whispers of their existence. The Roman Empire, with its iron grip, had arrived, and with it came the slow, inevitable erosion of everything the Nabataeans had built. History tells us of the Roman annexation, the subtle shifts in the way of life, but there are gaps. Huge gaps. Was their disappearance the result of conquest? Or something else? Theories abound, but no one can say for certain what happened to these people who once controlled the desert trade routes, whose gods had watched over them, and whose city was an architectural marvel. The stories that have survived paint a picture that is both tragic and mysterious. Some say that the Nabataeans were slowly absorbed by the mighty Roman Empire. Once their capital, Petra, fell under Roman control, the signs of the distinct Nabataean culture began to blur. Over time, their language, their rituals, their art all melted into the Roman way of life. The bustling trade routes they once controlled were now under the firm grasp of the empire. Could it have been a peaceful assimilation, where the Nabataeans simply blended into the vast Roman landscape? Or was there a deeper, more painful disappearance at play? There are others who believe that the Nabataeans did not simply fade away but that they left, fled into the very desert that had shaped them. The desert, vast and endless, had always been their home. It was here, among the shifting sands and towering cliffs, that they had carved their identity. So, perhaps when faced with the overwhelming might of Rome, they chose to abandon their city and return to the wilds of the desert. But even in the desert, the ghosts of Petra remain. No matter how far they might have run, how deeply they might have hidden, it is said that the spirit of Petra haunts the winds. Could it be that the Nabataeans, who once ruled the desert, left only to become wanderers in their own homeland, lost to time? And then there are the more mystical theories, the stories of spiritual transformation that seek to explain the disappearance of the Nabataeans. Some believe that the people of Petra, the very heart of Nabataean society, did not simply vanish but ascended to a higher plane of existence. Perhaps, faced with the coming storm of Roman rule and the decline of their empire, the Nabataeans underwent a spiritual metamorphosis. This theory suggests that their physical bodies left behind the city of Petra, but their souls transcended to the stars, to a place beyond time. The desert, once the cradle of their civilization, became the bridge to this otherworldly transformation. The gods that had once stood watch over them, their figures carved into the cliffs of Petra, might have led them into the next phase of their existence. The Nabataeans didn't disappear, they evolved. Yet, for all the theories, the truth remains hidden, just as the Nabataeans once hid behind the rock walls of Petra. Some say the truth lies buried beneath the stones, lost to the sands of time, never to be uncovered. Others claim the Nabataeans live on, not in the ruins of Petra but in the blood of their descendants who wander the desert still, holding on to the ancient stories, the ancient ways. The Nabataeans may have left behind no definitive trace of their decline, no great battle or cataclysmic event. They didn't leave a final chapter in the annals of history. Instead, they simply became whispers in the wind. The silent city of Petra stands as the final testament to their mystery. The rock-carved facades, once vibrant with life, now hold only echoes. The clever systems of water management, the grand tombs, and the towering monuments to their gods remain as beautiful as ever, but the people who built them are gone. No one knows for sure why they disappeared, only that they did. The mystery lingers in the dust, a shadow that stretches long over the ancient city. One thing is clear, the Nabataeans did not simply vanish because of Rome. The winds of change were already blowing before the Romans arrived. Something deeper had begun to stir in the soul of the Nabataean people. The old ways, the worship of many gods, had already started to falter in the face of new beliefs. Perhaps, in the end, it wasn't just the political power of Rome that caused their disappearance, but the spiritual shift that had begun long before. The gods of Petra, the very ones the Nabataeans had once turned to for guidance, seemed to fall silent as new gods began to rise. In their place, Christianity had slowly made its way through the eastern reaches of the Roman Empire, offering a new hope, a new way of life. The idea of one God, eternal and all-powerful, began to slowly replace the many gods of the Nabataeans. As Christianity spread across the empire, the old gods were gradually forgotten. The stories of Dashera, Aluzza, and the rest of the pantheon faded into myth, replaced by a new narrative that offered a different kind of salvation. Was it this slow shift in faith that led to the decline of the Nabataeans, or was it simply the march of time, the relentless tide of empire that eventually overtook them? Did they leave willingly, or were they caught between worlds, unable to find a place in either? Perhaps the Nabataeans chose to disappear in their own way, no longer bound by the city of Petra, no longer tied to the past but moving forward into an uncertain future. We may never know the true reason for their vanishing act, but the stories will remain. In the quiet shadows of Petra, in the whispers of the desert wind, the Nabataeans live on, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as a people whose disappearance is as much a part of their legend as the city they built. Their legacy endures not in the monuments they left behind, but in the mystery they created, a mystery that time, it seems, will never fully unravel. The sun had long set, and in the silent shadows of Petra's towering cliffs, a low whisper hung in the air. It was a sound unlike the wind or the earth, something more human, more ancient. The sound of lost fortunes, buried deep beneath the rose-red stones, waited. Legends had long told of treasures hidden in the tombs and structures of Petra, vast riches left behind by a civilization whose wealth had once flowed through the veins of the desert. Was it myth, or was it reality? The world wondered. In the heart of the city, where the silence pressed so close it felt like a living thing, the mystery only deepened. Many had come in search of this fabled treasure. Their eyes sparkled with the same feverish hope that drove those who believed in the impossible. The Petra hoard, they called it. Hidden gold, priceless jewels, the sacred relics of gods, and the riches of kings, all supposedly buried for centuries, waiting to be found. It was said to be locked away in the dark recesses of the city, beneath tombs that had never been opened, or inside the towering facades carved into the cliffside. The Nabataeans had vanished, their secrets taken to the grave, yet somehow, the whispers of their riches remained. As treasure hunters trekked into Petra's heart, they became part of an ancient tapestry. Some spoke of glistening treasures beyond imagination, their visions of wealth so grand they could almost see the gold shimmering beneath the earth. Others, driven by desperation or greed, sought to uncover artifacts that would bring them fame and fortune. There were stories of those who came too close to uncovering the hoard, only to be swallowed by the desert. Disappearances, mishaps, and accidents followed in their wake, strange enough to make anyone wonder if the city itself had a way of protecting its secrets. Yet there were those who didn't turn back, those who ventured into the depths of Petra's tombs with only a torch to light their path. They dug, scraped, and uncovered ancient inscriptions, sometimes finding remnants of the past, golden jewelry, pottery shards, or rare artifacts, but not the fabled hoard. One explorer, whose name was whispered among those who sought the treasures, spoke of a chamber he had found deep within the cliffs, where the air was so still it felt as if time had paused. He claimed the walls were lined with intricate carvings, some so detailed they almost seemed alive. In the center of the chamber, beneath layers of dust, he said, lay a chest, locked tight, just out of reach. His journey ended with his disappearance, and the chest remained untouched, a story wrapped in silence. Yet it wasn't just treasure hunters who were drawn into the enigma of Petra's hidden riches. Archaeologists, too, have sifted through the sands of time, painstakingly uncovering the past. They have found relics, evidence of trade and wealth, that point to the once thriving empire of the Nabataeans. What seemed like mere artifacts to some, coins, ornate jewelry, and intricate pottery, suddenly took on a new meaning when placed against the backdrop of the Petra hoard legend. Could these discoveries be pieces of a larger puzzle? Was there more hidden, waiting for the right hands to find it? In some of the tombs, treasures have indeed been uncovered, objects that hint at a civilization that knew no bounds to its wealth or culture. Yet, none have satisfied the fabled stories of a hoard so grand that it would change the course of history. Could it be that the real treasure was never meant to be physical? That the stories told by those who sought riches were really about the ancient knowledge, the secrets of the Nabataean people themselves? What if the treasure was something far more profound, insights into their gods, their way of life, their mysteries? What if Petra's true legacy lay not in its gold, but in its silence? Yet, the possibility remains that some treasures are still buried deep within the city. There are places in Petra that remain unexplored, tombs never opened, chambers hidden by the very rock that gave the city life. Who knows what lies beneath those stones? Maybe the hoard is still there, waiting for someone with the right combination of luck, skill, and timing to find it. Maybe it will remain lost forever, shrouded in myth and mystery, like the city itself. Every once in a while, rumors spark anew. A new discovery, a strange inscription, or a map that leads to a hidden chamber, each piece of evidence fueling the fire of the Petra hoard legend. But for every claim of a discovery, there are countless others that lead nowhere, a reminder that the desert is vast and its secrets stubbornly elusive. Some claim to have found treasure, while others have simply disappeared, swallowed by the desert in a way that feels less like an accident and more like the city reclaiming what was always meant to remain its own. There's something haunting about the idea that Petra's treasure may never be fully revealed. Perhaps the city, with all its beauty and history, is itself a treasure, a reminder of the Nabataean people who once thrived in the heart of the desert. Maybe the Petra hoard doesn't reside in a chest buried beneath the earth but in the legacy left behind, the ruins that continue to whisper of a civilization long gone, the gods that once ruled the land, and the stories that have endured against all odds. As the years pass and the sun rises and sets over the ancient city, one thing remains certain: Petra is more than a city of stones. It is a city of stories, of myths that refuse to die, of treasures, both tangible and intangible, that continue to pull at the hearts of those who dare to seek. The Petra hoard may never be fully found, but perhaps it doesn't need to be. Perhaps the true treasure lies not in the discovery, but in the journey itself, one that has led countless souls into the desert, chasing shadows and dreams, hoping that one day, the myth might finally become reality. The wind howled through the narrow canyons of Petra, carrying with it a faint whisper, as though the ancient city itself was speaking. It wasn't the wind, though, but the echoes of 1,000 untold stories. Some say the city is alive, that the very stones pulse with the memories of its past. And for the Bedouins who have lived around Petra for centuries, these stories are not just tales, they are warnings, reminders of the guardians who protect the secrets of the city and punish those who dare disturb them. For the Bedouin tribes, Petra was never just an abandoned ruin. It was a living, breathing place, filled with unseen forces. To them, the city was home to jinn, supernatural beings who could shape-shift and disappear into the wind, hiding just out of sight. The jinn were not the playful spirits of children's stories, but powerful, ancient entities, as old as the desert itself, tied to the very rocks and sands of Petra. These guardians, both feared and revered, were said to watch over the sacred sites, ensuring that no one who was unworthy would ever set foot in their domain. The Bedouins told of the curses that followed anyone who dared to disrespect the city or seek treasure where it wasn't meant to be found. If you disturb the peace of Petra, they whispered, the jinn will find you, and they will make sure you regret it. Some said the curses were swift, treasure hunters who disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only footprints that led into the heart of the city, never to return. Others spoke of the more subtle forms of punishment, a lingering illness, a growing sense of dread, and the feeling that you were being watched by unseen eyes. It was the desert's way of reminding people that Petra belonged to something greater than the mortal world. One particular story, passed down through generations, spoke of a lone traveler who came to Petra, seeking the fabled treasures hidden in its tombs. This traveler, unlike many others, was not deterred by the warnings of the locals. He entered the city at dusk, his footsteps echoing against the silent stone. As he explored the labyrinthine paths, he felt an overwhelming sense of being watched, though he was alone. The shadows seemed to twist and move, as if the very air around him was alive with ancient energy. He laughed it off, brushing away the uneasy feeling that gnawed at him. But as the night deepened, things began to change. He heard voices, low, guttural whispers, coming from the cracks in the rock. At first, he thought it was the wind, but the voices grew clearer, speaking in a language he did not understand. Panic set in. He turned to leave, but the way out was no longer clear. The paths seemed to shift, the tombs twisting around him in unnatural angles. The rocks, once so solid and still, seemed to move with him. With every step, the shadows grew darker, the whispers louder. Desperate, the traveler ran, his heart pounding in his chest, but the city would not let him go. Every path he took only led deeper into the heart of Petra. As he stumbled upon an ancient temple, the ground beneath him trembled. The jinn had found him, and with their fury, they made sure he would never leave. The last thing he heard before he vanished into the silence was a voice, soft and distant, whispering, "You do not belong here." The Bedouins knew better than to challenge the spirits of Petra. They spoke of the guardians of the stones, unseen forces that protected the sacred ground, their powers bound to the very land. There were places in Petra where even the most fearless would hesitate to tread, caverns that were too dark, tombs too quiet, and paths too narrow. It was said that those who ventured too far would sometimes return with their minds broken, muttering about shadows that followed them, eyes that glowed from the dark. These were the guardians' eyes, watchful, ever-present, ensuring that only those who had earned the right could access the heart of Petra. The Bedouin elders would gather around the fire at night, their voices low as they told the children about the supernatural encounters that had shaped their people's understanding of Petra. Some spoke of strange lights flickering in the distance, unexplainable phenomena that seemed to dance just beyond the reach of the human eye. Others told of omens, the sudden appearance of animals where there were none before, or the mysterious appearance of water in places where it should never have been. These were signs, they said, of the guardians watching over the land, sending warnings to those who would dare disrespect their city. The jinn, with their power to move through time and space, were believed to have a hand in these omens. They could be both protectors and avengers, punishing those who had wronged the sacred ground and guiding the worthy with subtle signs. It was said that the jinn could sense the intentions of anyone who entered Petra. Those with pure hearts would feel a strange sense of calm, as if they had been accepted by the city. But those who came with greed or malice would feel an oppressive weight in the air, a heaviness that pressed down on them as if the very stones were judging them. The local myths around Petra were not limited to the jinn. Many Bedouins believed that certain places in Petra were tied to ancient gods, beings that once walked among men, now hidden from sight, their power lingering in the stone. The tales told of a time when the gods ruled the land, their blessings and curses felt by all who walked beneath the desert sun. The temples of Petra were believed to be their homes, their domains, where the line between the mortal and the divine was thin. Some Bedouins claimed to have had encounters with these gods. They spoke of visions seen in dreams, of whispers that came to them in the night, guiding them to hidden water or showing them the way through a storm. For them, the gods were not distant figures of mythology but living beings whose influence stretched far beyond the walls of Petra. And the guardians, the jinn, were their emissaries, ensuring that the sacred grounds of Petra remained untouched by those unworthy to walk there. It was in this belief, in this powerful connection to the supernatural, that Petra's true mystery lay. The city itself, with its ancient ruins and silent tombs, was more than just stone. It was a place alive with history, with secrets, with guardians who stood watch over the land, both seen and unseen. The Bedouins understood this better than anyone. To them, Petra was not just a city, it was a living, breathing entity, its soul intertwined with the spirits of the desert. And so, they kept its secrets, honored its guardians, and feared the wrath of the jinn who watched from the shadows. The words of ancient Greek and Roman historians echo through the centuries, casting their gaze upon a people who seemed to exist in the shadows of history, mysterious, powerful, and yet curiously elusive. The Nabataeans. To the eyes of these writers, the Nabataeans were more than just traders or desert dwellers, they were figures wrapped in myth and grandeur, their story painted with strokes of awe and exaggeration. Their desert kingdom, Petra, became a place of legend, a city carved into stone, where riches flowed like water and secrets were buried deep within the earth. For the Greeks and Romans, the Nabataeans were the masters of the desert, mysterious and exotic, controlling the spice trade and offering access to goods from lands unknown. But what did these ancient writers really see? Were the Nabataeans truly the great, almost mythical figures described by historians like Strabo, Pliny, and Diodorus, or had their stories been distorted by time and the imagination of outsiders? Pliny the Elder, in his Natural History, paints a picture of the Nabataeans as wealthy and secretive, hoarding treasures that no one else could match. His words speak of their legendary skills in water management and their ability to flourish in one of the harshest climates known to man. He describes their city of Petra, built with such grandeur, that it seemed impossible for a civilization to survive in such an inhospitable place. He wrote of their trade caravans that crossed deserts and mountains, bringing silk and spices to the farthest corners of the Roman Empire. But buried within his words are hints of exaggeration, stories about the Nabataeans' riches, their godlike rulers, and their almost supernatural ability to survive in the wilderness. Were they all truth, or had the wonders of their civilization been inflated over time? Strabo, another ancient writer, also adds to the myth. He tells of a people who lived at the crossroads of the ancient world, with a kingdom that seemed almost too good to be true. In his geography, he speaks of the Nabataeans as a people who were both independent and yet skilled in diplomacy. They managed to avoid direct confrontation with the mighty Roman Empire by trading alliances as easily as they traded goods. He marvels at their wealth and power, and how they could carve a city into the mountains themselves. Yet, Strabo's account, though filled with admiration, has a sense of distance. He never fully understood the true nature of the Nabataeans. They were, to him, figures of intrigue, whose society seemed almost alien in comparison to his own. But these writers, so distant from the Nabataean world, could only guess at the true nature of the people they described. What they saw was filtered through their own cultural lens, shaped by awe and fear of a civilization that could thrive where others would perish. Their descriptions were filled with mythological exaggerations. These writers spoke of an almost divine power that allowed the Nabataeans to control trade routes and become masters of their environment. To the Greeks and Romans, the Nabataeans were almost godlike, able to tame the desert, survive in extreme conditions, and possess knowledge that seemed beyond the grasp of others. Was this a reflection of their greatness, or had their image been blown out of proportion by outsiders who couldn't quite comprehend the full extent of what the Nabataeans had achieved? And yet, when we look at the archaeological evidence, a different story begins to emerge. The grandeur of Petra is undeniable, a city carved into the cliffs, with elaborate temples, tombs, and an entire urban infrastructure. The Nabataeans did, in fact, create engineering marvels, such as their sophisticated water management systems, that allowed them to flourish in the arid desert. Their ability to control the flow of water, in an environment where it was scarce, was nothing short of brilliant. Evidence of their trade networks, too, is clear, with artifacts from all over the ancient world found in the ruins of Petra. This was not the stuff of legend, it was the result of a deeply intelligent and resourceful people who knew how to adapt to their environment and make the most of what they had. But the stories written by ancient historians still linger, shaping how we view the Nabataeans even today. The difference between the written word and the physical evidence is striking. While the Greeks and Romans saw the Nabataeans as a mysterious, almost mystical people, the archaeological record shows them to be real, complex, and human. The myths that grew up around the Nabataeans, particularly the stories about their wealth and power, may have been embellished to highlight their difference from the rest of the ancient world. The Nabataeans were more than just traders, they were a society with its own rich culture, politics, and religion, all woven together by the threads of myth and history. As we sift through the layers of ancient writings and compare them with the ruins that remain, the gap between myth and reality becomes increasingly clear. What the ancient historians saw as fantastical is grounded in the practical achievements of the Nabataean people, wonders of engineering, brilliant trade routes, and the kind of knowledge that can only come from generations of survival in one of the harshest landscapes on Earth. The Nabataeans may not have been the gods the ancient writers made them out to be, but they were far from ordinary. Their achievements in architecture, trade, and water management were extraordinary by any measure, and they left a legacy that continues to astound us. And yet, for all the archaeological evidence, the myths surrounding the Nabataeans remain. Their civilization, once so powerful and proud, eventually faded into the past, leaving behind only whispers of what was. The ancient writers' accounts of their riches, their strange ways, and their seemingly magical survival in the desert have become as much a part of their story as the ruins of Petra itself. The Nabataeans, in the eyes of ancient historians, were never just a people, they were a legend, a story too incredible to believe, but one that is forever etched in the records of history. The gap between myth and reality, between the accounts of ancient writers and the truths uncovered in the sands of time, speaks to something deeper than just the history of a lost civilization. It speaks to the way stories are born, grow, and evolve over time. What remains of the Nabataeans is not just their architecture or their trade routes, but the legends that still linger in the air, whispering across the desert like the wind itself. In the quiet hills surrounding Petra, where the sun casts long shadows over the ancient stone, one can almost hear the echoes of the past. It's as though the wind itself carries whispers of a time long gone, of a civilization that once stood tall and proud, its influence lingering even as the sands of time slowly swallowed its name. The Nabataeans, a people who shaped the desert into something far greater than anyone could have imagined, left behind more than just ruins and relics. They left a legacy that stretched across centuries, subtly woven into the fabric of early Arab culture and the dawn of Islam. As the Arab world began to take shape, the memory of the Nabataeans was not erased. Rather, their culture, language, and beliefs quietly seeped into the traditions that would come to define the region. To many, the Nabataeans were just a distant memory, a forgotten civilization lost beneath the weight of empires and the rise of new beliefs. Yet, in the shadows, traces of their influence remain, like hidden jewels waiting to be uncovered. Islamic historians, fascinated by the past, would often blend myth and fact, weaving the stories of the Nabataeans into the rich tapestry of Arab history. These early chroniclers saw them not just as traders or desert dwellers, but as mysterious figures whose legacy shaped the very foundations of the culture that would follow. Islamic traditions themselves carry subtle echoes of the Nabataean past. The Nabataeans were a people steeped in spiritual practices, their beliefs and customs deeply rooted in the land and the forces of nature. Their gods were often tied to the cycles of the earth, the sun, and the stars, gods who watched over the desert, guarding its hidden treasures and secrets. These divine figures, perhaps, laid the groundwork for the spiritual ideas that would later become part of the broader Arab world. In the rituals and practices of early Arab tribes, there are hints of Nabataean influence, shadows of sacred practices that may have been passed down through the centuries, like a quiet song sung by the winds that had once swept through Petra. Even the Nabataean language, a beautiful script carved into stone and clay, lived on in some of the earliest forms of written Arabic. The connection between these two languages, although not always overtly acknowledged, can be seen in the flowing lines of Arabic calligraphy, the shapes of the letters, and the cadence of the words. It is as though the Nabataeans, in their mastery of trade and culture, had laid down the linguistic foundations that would one day be built upon by the Arab poets and scholars who followed. The language of the desert, once spoken in the hidden corners of Petra, now echoed across the world in the words of the Quran and the poetry of the Arab Golden Age. The Nabataeans were also deeply connected to the land they inhabited. Their understanding of the desert, its rhythms and its mysteries, was unparalleled. This knowledge, passed down through generations, would have had a profound impact on the early Arab tribes who roamed the vast stretches of sand. The rituals surrounding water, the care for sacred springs, and the reverence for certain trees and plants, all of these practices found their way into the culture of the emerging Arab world. Even the way the Nabataeans had built their city, Petra, carved into the mountains and hidden from the world, might have inspired the way early Arab communities sought to protect their own sacred sites. Just as the Nabataeans built tombs and shrines into the cliffs, so too would the Arabs build mosques and religious sites that stood as symbols of their own connection to the divine. But perhaps the most striking connection between the Nabataeans and early Islam lies in the myths that surrounded them. These stories, woven with strands of truth and exaggeration, found their way into the collective memory of the Arab world. The Nabataeans, with their riches and power, were seen not just as a people but as a symbol of something greater, the transition from the old ways of polytheism to the monotheistic beliefs that would soon sweep across the Arabian Peninsula. In the tales told by later generations, the Nabataeans became figures of both mystery and awe, and their beliefs were transformed into the stuff of legend. The Nabataean gods, once worshipped in the temples of Petra, were absorbed into the mythological landscape of early Arab culture. The gods of the Nabataeans, once seen as protectors of the desert, began to fade into the background as the new faith of Islam spread across the land. Yet, in their place, a new kind of reverence took root, a reverence for the one true God, Allah, whose power and presence eclipsed all other deities. The transition from the many gods of the Nabataeans to the singular divinity of Islam was not an abrupt shift, but a slow, almost organic process. It was as though the spirits of the desert, the jinn, and the gods of old had slowly merged into the concept of a singular, all-encompassing God. There are moments, even now, when the legacy of the Nabataeans still lingers in the air, when the wind whispers their names across the desert. In the towering mountains of Petra, where the sun sets in a blaze of red and gold, the echoes of an ancient people can still be heard. They are no longer a distant memory but are woven into the very fabric of the land, their language, their practices, and their beliefs having left an indelible mark on the Arab world and the religion that would rise from it. In the early days of Islam, when the tribes of the Arabian Peninsula were still finding their place in a changing world, the Nabataeans were both a reminder of what had come before and a harbinger of what was to come. Their cultural and spiritual legacy, passed down through the centuries, shaped the ways in which the Arab people would come to understand the divine, the sacred, and the mysteries of the desert. And even as the Nabataeans themselves faded from the stage of history, their influence remained, quiet, subtle, and powerful, like the wind that has always blown through the canyons of Petra. In 1812, as the sun beat down on the Jordanian hills, a lone figure made his way through the arid desert. His name was Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, and he had no idea that with every step he took, he was about to bring back a lost world, a world hidden from the gaze of the modern era for centuries. There, in the heart of the desert, obscured by time and legend, he stumbled upon what seemed to be nothing more than a forgotten echo, a city carved from rock, its grandeur silently speaking of a once great civilization. Petra. The city that had long been shrouded in mystery, only whispered about in the stories of nomads and traders, was about to be rediscovered. The moment Burckhardt set foot into Petra, it was as though the city itself took a deep, silent breath, exhaling the weight of centuries, of silence. Beneath his feet, the stone pathways whispered of ancient lives, of traders who had once walked there, of travelers who had found their way into the desert heart. His eyes widened as he gazed at the towering cliffs and intricate carvings that decorated the facades of the city. It was a moment that stirred the very air around him. What was once buried in the dust of history was now being pulled back into the light. The rediscovery of Petra in 1812 was more than just the unearthing of a lost city, it was a rebirth of a legend. Word spread quickly. The mystique surrounding the Nabataeans, a people whose history had been swallowed by time, began to resurface. Archaeologists and explorers flooded into the region, eager to peel back the layers of history, to dig deeper into the mystery of Petra, the Nabataean people, and the lost world that had been hidden from the rest of the world. What Burckhardt had uncovered was not just stone and dust but a treasure trove of stories waiting to be told once more. The impact of this rediscovery on archaeology was nothing short of revolutionary. For centuries, Petra had been little more than a myth, a place spoken of in hushed tones by those who dared venture into the desert, but its true significance had remained largely unknown. Now, as scholars and archaeologists ventured into its ancient tombs and temples, it was as if they were lifting the veil from an ancient world. As they unearthed inscriptions, carvings, and artifacts, they began to piece together a portrait of a people whose lives were inextricably linked to the land and the desert they called home. The Nabataeans, once lost to history, were now being reborn in the pages of books, in the annals of archaeology, and in the hearts of those who longed to understand their story. But with the rediscovery came new myths, new layers added to the already thick fog of mystery surrounding Petra and the Nabataeans. Every corner of the city seemed to breathe with its own tale. The so-called lost treasure of Petra became a legend that persisted through the years, with treasure hunters and adventurers flocking to the ancient city, searching for riches hidden deep within the tombs and chambers of the city. Was there really treasure buried there, waiting to be claimed? Or was it a myth, a story spun by the echoes of time, forever taunting those who sought what could never be found? As Petra became a symbol of mystery and grandeur, the allure of the Nabataeans grew. People from all corners of the world flocked to Jordan, eager to witness the majesty of the city for themselves, to walk the same steps as those who had come before them. The rise of tourism brought with it a new kind of fascination, a fascination with the past that bordered on obsession. In every stone, in every monument, visitors could feel the weight of history. They saw in Petra not just a city but a living, breathing piece of the past, waiting to be touched and understood. Yet, with the rising tide of tourism came the realization that the city needed protection. Conservation efforts began to take shape, as the very elements that had preserved Petra for centuries, the desert winds, the dry heat, the harsh sun, began to take their toll on the ancient structures. It was a delicate balance. How could the city be preserved while also allowing the world to witness its beauty? Every crack in the stone, every fading carving, seemed to carry with it the weight of an entire history, one that could slip away if not carefully watched over. Despite the preservation efforts, myths continued to surround Petra and the Nabataeans. Were they a people of magic, masters of ancient secrets, or merely traders and builders? Stories began to emerge of hidden chambers beneath the city, of treasures locked away in secret vaults, untouched by the hand of time. Some said that the Nabataeans had left behind their most precious relics, sealed away in tombs designed to protect their sacred artifacts for eternity. These stories captured the imagination of many, fueling the belief that Petra held not only the keys to understanding the Nabataean people but also the possibility of discovering something far greater, something beyond even the riches of the earth. As more and more was uncovered, the line between myth and history blurred. The city became not just an archaeological site but a canvas for the imagination, a place where anything was possible. The legends of the Nabataeans, of their wealth, their knowledge, and their mysterious disappearance, wove themselves into the fabric of the city, and Petra became a place where past and present collided. The visitors who came, drawn by the allure of a long-lost civilization, did not just see ruins, they saw the possibility of something more, something that had slipped through the cracks of time, only to re-emerge when it was least expected. The rediscovery of Petra was not just the unearthing of a city, it was the awakening of a dream. The myths of the Nabataeans, once thought to be the stuff of legend, were now breathing again in the modern world. Yet, even as the world's attention turned to Petra, there remained a sense of mystery, a sense that perhaps, just perhaps, the city still held secrets it was not yet ready to reveal. And as long as people walked its ancient paths, as long as the wind still whispered through the cliffs, the Nabataeans would never truly be gone. They would live on, in the stories, in the myths, in the hearts of those who dared to seek them out. Beneath the scorching sun and the endless stretch of desert, the stone walls of Petra hold on to their secrets like a silent sentinel, watching the world pass by. The air is thick with the scent of dust and age, but there are whispers, carried by the wind, of things hidden, of mysteries that still refuse to reveal themselves. Despite centuries of exploration and research, the Nabataeans, this extraordinary civilization that once thrived in the heart of the desert, remain an enigma. Some say they left behind treasures, others insist they were masters of arcane knowledge, and yet there are stories of tunnels, secret societies, and conspiracies that remain forever out of reach. Even now, after so much has been uncovered, it's impossible to ignore the nagging feeling that something crucial has been overlooked, something profound, hidden beneath layers of stone and time. The answers elude us, slipping through the cracks like sand in an hourglass, but the questions persist, haunting us with their presence. Were the Nabataeans simply a trading empire, or did they harbor knowledge, rituals, or powers that went beyond what we understand? Were their stunning rock carvings not just art, but a map, a code? And what of the dark stories that have circled Petra like a storm, about lost tunnels and forgotten chambers? The theories seem to multiply with every new discovery. Some believe that beneath Petra's awe-inspiring facades lie hidden passageways, tunnels that snake through the mountains, leading to untold treasures or perhaps sacred sites never meant to be found. The idea of secret tunnels that stretch for miles, connecting Petra to distant places, stirs the imagination. Were they built to conceal something of immense value, or were they meant to protect something from a world that would destroy it? The truth is, no one knows. Archaeologists and treasure hunters have scoured the land, but the tunnels, if they exist, are still waiting to reveal themselves, as elusive as the shadows at dusk. And then there are the stories of secret societies. Whispers persist that the Nabataeans, like many ancient cultures, had knowledge that could change the course of history, knowledge so powerful that it had to be hidden from the world. Some claim that there were secret societies, guarding these secrets for centuries, passing them down in whispers and shadows. Others speak of hidden rituals, practices that may have been too dangerous, too forbidden, to survive the ravages of time. But the truth of these stories remains tangled in myth, locked away in the silence of Petra's towering walls. Despite the growing intrigue, the real answers seem just out of reach. Scientific investigations have offered new possibilities, like DNA evidence that could trace the origins of the Nabataeans, or the discovery of inscriptions that could shed light on their beliefs and practices. But each revelation leads to more questions. Did the Nabataeans originate from a different place altogether, or were they a unique people whose ties to the surrounding regions were far more complex than we ever imagined? What was the true extent of their influence over the ancient world, and how did they manage to remain hidden for so long? Recent archaeological findings have added fuel to the fire of speculation. Carved statues, once thought to be simple representations of gods, have been found with symbols that seem to reference far older traditions, traditions that some believe stretch back to the dawn of human civilization. Could these objects and symbols be part of a larger, more intricate puzzle, one that we've yet to fully comprehend? Some experts insist that they are nothing more than artistic representations, while others argue that they are markers, keys to an ancient code that, if deciphered, could reveal the true purpose of Petra. Each new discovery is both a triumph and a reminder that so much remains out of our grasp. The tantalizing thought that there are still unknown chambers beneath the sandstone cliffs, waiting to be discovered, is enough to send a chill down anyone's spine. But there's something even more unsettling about the thought that perhaps the secrets of Petra are not meant to be found, that they are meant to remain hidden, guarded by time and the shifting sands. And so, Petra stands, its grandeur undeniable, its history a mix of fact and myth, science and speculation. There are those who see the city as a monument to human achievement, a testament to the ingenuity of a people who thrived in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Yet, for all the awe it inspires, it also evokes something else, a sense of longing, as though it is not just a city, but a living memory, holding on to something precious that we can never fully grasp. The Nabataeans may have left behind their architecture, their art, and their stories, but did they also leave behind something more, something intangible, something that continues to echo in the whispers of the wind? As we try to piece together the story of the Nabataeans, we are faced with the unsettling reality that much of their history may never be known. The more we uncover, the more we realize how much we don't understand. Was their power truly a result of their mastery of trade and engineering, or was there something more, something hidden beneath the surface, something that even time itself cannot erase? The myths surrounding Petra, the tunnels, the secret societies, the treasure, all persist like shadows in the corners of our minds, refusing to fade into the past. For some, these mysteries are a siren call, a challenge to uncover the unknown, to solve the riddles left behind by a people who seem to have disappeared as mysteriously as they arrived. For others, the mysteries serve as a reminder of the limitations of human understanding, that no matter how much we learn, there will always be things beyond our grasp, hidden from view. And perhaps that's the most haunting aspect of Petra, the fact that its mysteries may remain forever out of reach, suspended in time, like a story left unfinished. The Nabataeans may have vanished, but their legacy endures, not just in the stone that still stands, but in the questions that continue to haunt us. What was lost when Petra fell? And what truths, if any, still lie buried beneath the sands, waiting to be discovered by those who dare to seek them? The desert stretches out before you, a vast sea of sand and stone, timeless and unyielding. But amidst the harshness of the arid landscape, a city carved from the very rock itself rises, Petra, a testament to the vision and ingenuity of a people who thrived against the odds. The Nabataeans, masters of water, stone, and trade, transformed the barren land into a bustling hub of culture, commerce, and power. Their achievements, etched in the faces of their stone-carved monuments, have left an indelible mark not only on the land of Jordan but on the world. The legacy of the Desert Kings is not just a relic of the past, it echoes through time, influencing the present in ways that still resonate with us today. When you walk through Petra, the grand facades of temples and tombs rise above you, silent but full of stories. Their detailed carvings speak of gods, kings, and warriors long gone, but they also whisper of a remarkable understanding of engineering that allowed the Nabataeans to thrive in one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. Their mastery of water management, a delicate and brilliant system of channels, cisterns, and aqueducts, made the impossible possible. Where there was once only dust, they crafted life. Without their ingenuity in harnessing water, Petra would never have been the jewel of the desert that it became. The remarkable systems they built continue to fascinate modern engineers and architects, even as their ancient tools and methods are studied and admired. The Nabataeans were not just builders of stone, but also traders who bridged civilizations. They carved out a kingdom that connected the East and the West, trading spices, incense, and precious goods. The path they forged across the desert became a lifeline for cultures far and wide. Their ability to thrive in the harsh desert, to not just survive but flourish, speaks volumes about the power of resilience. In an age when survival often meant surrendering to the forces of nature, the Nabataeans held fast, shaping their world to fit their needs, rather than the other way around. Their influence stretches far beyond the desert of Jordan. The architectural designs they pioneered in Petra have inspired generations. The rock-hewn tombs and temples are not just relics, they are a living blueprint that modern architects still look to today. Their sense of scale and proportion, their understanding of how to harmonize with the natural landscape, and their determination to make the most of limited resources have resonated through centuries. The way they carved their homes and places of worship directly into the stone was not just an act of survival, it was a statement. It was an expression of their identity, their belief that they could create beauty even in the harshest of places. This defiance of nature is something that still captivates the world. But it is not just their architectural genius that continues to influence us, it is also the myths and legends that surround them. Stories of the desert kings, their wealth, their wisdom, and their mysterious disappearance, have been passed down through the generations. These stories are not just ancient fairy tales, they hold within them powerful lessons. The Nabataeans were a people who knew how to adapt, how to change and grow, and how to protect their way of life even in the face of great threats. They remind us of the importance of innovation, of finding new ways to survive and thrive in a constantly changing world. Even today, the lessons of the Nabataeans are relevant. In a world where climate change and resource scarcity are looming threats, the Nabataeans' ability to adapt to and shape their environment feels all the more profound. They faced their challenges head-on, transforming the desert into a prosperous kingdom. Their legacy is not just about the buildings they left behind, but about the mindset they embodied, a spirit of resilience, innovation, and adaptability. In every corner of the world, from the engineering feats of modern cities to the ways in which we think about sustainability, the Nabataeans' legacy can still be felt. The myths about their treasures, hidden deep within the rock, continue to capture the imagination. Stories of their secret knowledge, of treasures waiting to be discovered, speak to the heart of every adventurer. But perhaps the greatest treasure the Nabataeans left behind is not gold or jewels, but the lessons they imparted through their actions. Their story is one of determination, of a people who carved out a place for themselves in the world and refused to be erased by time or circumstance. Today, when you stand in the ruins of Petra, with the sun setting behind the rose-red stones, you feel the weight of history pressing in. You can almost hear the echoes of the voices that once filled the bustling streets, the merchants haggling over goods, the priests chanting prayers to gods now forgotten. You can feel the pulse of a civilization that refused to be swallowed by the sands of time. The legacy of the Nabataeans is not just written in stone, it is written in the way we think, the way we build, and the way we face challenges. Their influence lives on in ways that are impossible to measure, and yet, unmistakable in their presence. In every modern achievement, every building that rises from the earth, and every innovation that changes the world, there is a small piece of the Nabataean spirit. They were a people who understood the power of nature and how to work with it, not against it. They understood that survival was not just about strength, but about adaptability and vision. They did not let the desert define them, they defined their place in it. The stories of their gods, their kings, their mysteries, though shrouded in myth, continue to capture our imagination. The idea that a people could flourish in a place so unforgiving, that they could carve beauty from rock and trade across vast distances, speaks to something deep within us all. It reminds us that, even in the most inhospitable circumstances, greatness can arise. The Nabataeans may have left no written record of their greatest triumphs, but the way they shaped the world around them speaks louder than words ever could. Their legacy, carved into the stone and woven into the fabric of our world, is not just a memory, it's a living testament to what humans are capable of when they refuse to bow to the odds stacked against them. The Nabataeans may have been kings of the desert, but their influence has stretched far beyond their time, continuing to inspire and guide us today. Their story is not just one of a lost civilization, but of a people whose spirit has never truly disappeared. It still lives on in the rocks of Petra and in the hearts of those who dream of what it means to thrive against all odds.